Hi guys, we are on our way to Dallas and to get some treatments, and in our car ride I thought, well, we will use this time to do a little video to update y'all on everything that's kind of transpired since the beginning and kind of catch you up on this last week. There's been lots of appointments this week, and so here we go. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I have Eric, my husband's right there, so he can kind of chime in too. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about that has kind of, I guess, is how we kind of, part of the reason we make some of the decisions we make is our philosophy on health. So when we as a family talk about health, we really believe that, like the Bible says, we are triune beings. We have a physical body, there's our mind, and then there's our spirit or soul, part of who we are. And we are under the belief that they're all linked together. So if you have a physical whatever going on, there might be a spiritual link, or it could affect your spirit, man, or your mind, right? And the same is true on other things. You know, if you're battling with a lot of negative thoughts, it can affect your physical health, and so on and so forth. And so early on in my diagnosis and, I guess kind of figuring out like what to do, what are we going to do? One of the first things we kind of tackled is that spiritual side, Then we get to the philosophy of what do we believe about Jesus and healings today? Because I know not all Christians are under the same belief on that, but we do believe that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And therefore, what he did back in Bible times, he's able to do today. That his spirit is still here with us, active and moving and doing. And so we are under the belief that we can be healed from anything. And so we right away started praying, started looking up scriptures that had to do with life and health, and speaking those over us. Blessing, right? Blessing our bodies, my body, blessing our home, speaking life in that blessing and calling life forth, but then also pleading the blood of Jesus. What he did on the cross wasn't just for our salvation, but it is for our wholeness and for the promises that he has given us in his word, which we believe is truth. And so our family praying, going to our church and having them pray. They have a healing room there that they go through, like that spiritual aspect of healing. And we had a lady come and visit our church who had a gifting in healing. She had received a miraculous healing. She was basically on her deathbed. Her family was expecting her to pass. They had gotten rid of her clothes and just crazy stuff, and she just knew she was going to get a healing. And she finally she was seeking out somebody, I can't remember his name, that was
Randy Clark.
Oh, Randy Clark. And she kept going. She went to finally got to one of his little services or something, and of course they were like, we have a guy who's going to pray for you. And she was like, well, I didn't come here for him, I came here for the other guy. But this guy prayed for her, and she received a miraculous healing. And then so they were like, you need what you receive, you should give. So she prayed for other people, and they started getting healing. And so now her, it's been how many years since didn't she say like 10? I want to say it's been like 10 years that this happened. And she goes around now and speaks and has prayer events for healing. And so she came into our church, and we went, and she prayed for me one night, and then the next day I had set up an appointment to meet with her, and we prayed. And after that meeting, I really had felt like a really hot spot under my arm. like where my lymph node was, and I just knew. I knew it was almost like a branding iron, going in, and it was just an intense fire spot. And then on my mass, I felt warmth, but not like something as intense as that. But she asked, how is it? And smaller? And I said, yes. And so she said, okay, keep going, keep praying, keep doing. And went home, and then she said, if it's not gone, you come to me Sunday, the next day. And so Sunday I went back to her, and I told her again, like, it's smaller, but it's still there. And so we prayed and prayed, and we were up at church, I think, till 2 o'clock. She was praying for me, and then she'd be like, all right, you check. And then she's like, all right, husband, you check. And here we are, all filling with my boob in church, but, and we really felt it was gone. I mean, we didn't feel any like hard defined area. Anyway, so we went and celebrated. We just knew we had gotten my miracle. And the next day, or maybe it was that night, we kind of felt again, and we kind of felt it. So we were like kind of bummed, but also, like, all right, it's fine. We know what to do. Let's pray and keep praying. Anyway, the next day was our oncologist appointment for my first round of chemo, which I'll get to that in a second. So anyway, so we know God's moving and God is working, and He is showing us that He can. But always, His ways are not always our ways. So it's, why don't all get healing? I don't know who asked, or why don't we get it right then, when we ask? And we went through a lot of other stuff. We talked about forgiveness. That's, a big part. There's a lot of spiritual things that we have to kind of tackle or look at, and when you're talking about any kind of healing. But that's kind of where our journey began. In that time, we had my port put in. We were planning on, with my family history of cancer and breast cancer, kind of my philosophy, and a lot of it was from fear, a lot of fearfulness because of things, but I was kind of thinking, I'm going to hit this from every angle: spiritual, physical, mental, holistic, traditional. So our plans was to do everything we could, and that included chemo. So got my port put in, got our appointment to meet with the oncologist, met with the oncologist. He examined me and told me the plan. And then our friend dropped us another name of a doctor in Dallas. And so we didn't check him out right away. I think in our mind we were thinking, that's Dallas, how's that going to work? But I think, after a little while we were like, we need to really, this name didn't just drop in our lap for, coincidence. There's always purpose behind everything. So we went to his website, looked and was reading everything, and it was really kind of, we could tell that he had the same idea about health as we did, which we like, because you don't always find that integrative approach in traditional doctors and medicine. And so that was one of our reasons to go ahead and I emailed him and told him my diagnosis and if they could help me and kind of my plan with chemo, and they emailed me back and said, oh, we've done that. We've helped people through chemo, or people who didn't want to do chemo, or even people who don't have cancer but other health issues. So we scheduled an appointment to meet with him. So that is kind of where we were at that time. We did go and meet with him, I think, before starting chemo. And he too was very much into the spirit man, the physical man, the mind. We talked a lot about the spiritual, some spiritual stuff behind specifically breast cancer and on which side, and what that kind of means for me to kind of think and pray about that and see what God shows me and what I need to forgive and release to have healing. We talked also mentality and positive thinking and even higher up. What does he always says? Go higher.
Yeah, he says that the traditional doctors have one level. They take it to the level of reason, which has its limits. Like you're limited by it. But then he says there's a higher level of thinking where you think for the impossible, and those things that are impossible become possible because you have a higher mentality about it. Basically he's talking about faith.
Or in hope.
I mean, if you have hope that you're going to get healed, even no matter how bad it is, your healing can come.
Right.
Your body, you're unleashing. Maybe it's a energy or whatever, spiritual aspect. You're opening the door for the supernatural to happen.
Right. Which we've read a lot about that in like business books. The power of positive thinking and how if you say you can't, you won't. But if you say you can, somehow you can. And the same is true in the healing realm. And it's funny because we had told him we're going to do chemo and all this, and he was like, okay, well, I'll support whatever, and we'll meet. Well, I'll help you, like whatever you want. But then later, which we'll get to it later, it's just funny. He kind of waits for you and meets you where you're at, which is good. But he's always, was challenging us to think higher, to think of forgiveness and hope and have the faith, and what you have faith for, you'll get, Anyway, he also, one thing I liked about him too, he was like, well, I'm not just going to treat you for cancer. I'm going to let's just look at your whole body and be thorough here at what all we can do to make me, talking about me, healthier. And, just in his exam, he was looking at my throat and was like, has she always been swollen right here? I think her thyroid's off. And I was like, I've been thinking my thyroid's off for years, and I've asked them to check it and they won't because it's always been normal. So he's like, well, we're going to check it and we're going to do a thorough check, not just a general TSH, but we're going to do test your T3 and T4 and all that. And then he was like, your coloring, your hair coloring, your skin coloring, your eye coloring, your freckles, makes me think of this group of population that typically have this genetic mutation that could be hindering your detoxification, which could contribute to you having this cancer. He's like, have you ever been tested for it? And I'm like, no, but I've actually think my son might have it, and we've kind of looked into it. And he's all like, we're going to test you. And then what was the other thing? I think he also talked about, he was talking about my personality. He's like, you're a nurse, you're homeschooling, you work. I don't know, he was kind of like, are you type A or something, and I was like, yes I am. I don't know how to slow down. I only know full force going forward. And, and he talked about, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't have a hobby. I don't have time for a hobby, but then he's like, well, what do you do for relaxation? I'm like,
paint.
Well, but it's usually for CC, our homeschool group. It's, very rarely do I say, okay, at this day of the week, on this evening, I'm going to have painting time, or this day of the week, I'm going to take a bubble bath. It's very rare.
Play Hunter.
I do like playing Hunter on the Xbox, but sometimes that's frustrating because I can't get the animal. Anyway, but he was just talking about I can tell, you need to learn how to slow down, and you need to learn how to breathe, which led us into a conversation about oxygen. And he said, cancer grows in a non-oxygen environment, and if you're not slowing down and taking those good deep breaths and getting the oxygen in your body, and your cortisol levels are crazy, he's like, that could be feeding your cancer. And so he was like, have you ever had a sleep study done? And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, we're going to send that home with you, because you might be not getting enough oxygen during the night, and it could be feeding your cancer. So he sent me home with a thing that checked my oxygen level and my pulse and my respirations, and it recorded it all night long, and then I sent it back just to see. So he was very thorough in like just health assessment and health questioning, which I thought was really good. I haven't had that good of a kind of a health assessment in years. I can't even tell you. Even though we have a family doctor, very kind of laissez-faire, and I don't know if it's because I'm a nurse and they just expect, but there's been things I've asked for that they have said, I don't think we need to do that. I don't think we need to do that, you know. So I don't think it's necessarily that they have just expected me to request it, because I have. There just seemed to be a lot more hands-off. And so I really appreciated that. And so that was his initial appointment. He did a bunch of blood work. He also did this thing called microscopy, where you put a drop of blood on this real high-powered microscope, and we got to see it. And so you see your red blood cells floating. I keep seeing, I want to say swimming, but they're floating across the screen. And she's looking at him to see, you know, one of his nurses or somebody, you know, and she'll tell you, oh, those are good and healthy, yeah. And then we saw some of my red blood cells kind of just clumped together. And she says, you see that clumpage? That's oxidative stress. That's stress in your body. When you are under stress, it causes them to clump. Excuse me. And I was like, well, heck, that's me all the time. I'm not that stressed, but I'm always go, 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 go. And, you know, my mind, anyway. So she said that, you know, you have a lot of that. And I did. And then we saw my white blood cells, and they were cute, pretty. But then we saw these other things. And so we said, what are those? And she said, that is candida or fungus in your blood. And she's like, that's not supposed to be in your blood, but you have it somewhere in your body, and it's spilling over into your blood. And this is just one drop of blood. So I had quite a bit. And she said, so if we see all this in one drop, think of how much is floating around in your blood. So
she did say, though, that yours is lower than normal.
Right.
Most people have a lot of candida in them. They don't realize it because of our modern American diet.
Yeah, so she was really kind of surprised at how little I did have, but I still had some. And then she was looking for something else, and so you could tell because she kept moving it all around, zoomed in, and we were like, well, you know, she said, well, we're trying to find if you have any metals. And she finally found one in my drop of blood, but still, one in your drop, think of how many are in the rest of your circulatory system. Anyway, she showed us that, and she was like, see, it's iridescent. And she zoomed in and out, and you could see it kind of shine and whatever. And so she said, we can't tell what kind of metal it is, but we know that you have some kind of metal in your blood. And so she said, well, he'll probably order at some point a test to actually see what heavy metal you have in your blood system, and then order some IV chelation to pull it out. So that test was going to be this week, but due to me being on my cycle, it's postponed till next week. But he'll actually test it and see what kind of metal it is, and then order IV chelation, which goes in and grabs a hold of it and pulls it out of your system. Anyway, so that was our initial meeting with him. Then we come back, and we didn't get any treatments or anything. We go to our oncologist appointment. And so before I get into going to the oncologist appointment, I just want to explain to y'all what cancer is, because I think a lot of people don't really know what cancer is. And I have found, especially going to the traditional doctors, that cancer is like this big bad wolf, and it's scary, and they kind of push that on us, and it's very different talking to our doctor in Dallas, who is like, this is treatable, it's like anything else, but it's going to take a lot of work. And compared to the traditional doctor that you feel like you have no options but theirs, and there's, you know, and again, when it comes to traditional medicine and doctors, that's what they're trained in, that's all they know, unless they have really gone out on their own to seek out other methodologies, other practices, Eastern medicine, other, you know, there's a gamut of other things out there they don't know. But they do kind of make you feel like cancer's, you know, and I kind of felt that way. when I first got diagnosed, I kind of felt like it was a death sentence because nobody in my family has really lived long after being initially diagnosed with cancer. And then they tried the traditional stuff, and it either harmed them or it didn't do well with them, and then it came back, or it spread, or new cancer came up, and you know, my grandma, from her initial diagnosis, 8 years about, my aunt from initial diagnosis till she passed was about 13 years. So here I am when I first got diagnosed thinking, I only have so many years left, you know, and you start thinking that, and it gets scary, and there's been a lot of fear. I think so far on this journey, that's been my biggest enemy that I have been fighting, is fear, you know. And again, spiritually speaking, you know, going back to that, you know, now that I'm a believer, I believe that I am knitted into Jesus's family, his DNA, and his promises, and his, you know, who I am wrapped in him, right? As a believer, when you have really submitted your life, it's now Jesus that lives in you, and like really meditating on what that means and how I can stand on that to fight the fear of family genetics, or, you know, or fate, or even the scary thing called cancer. So, you know, we've done a lot of kind of research on what is cancer. And so cancer is when your normal cells in your system, something goes haywire with them and they mutate. And what that means is, instead of, you have your RNA that comes up to pair with your DNA when your DNA replicates, and instead of that coming from your other healthy cells, it comes from somewhere else. Some say, you know, it's these foreign things in our body, viruses, or candida, you know, which is fungus. And then what it does is, when that cell replicates now, because it has this foreign stuff, it's mutated. So now you have this mutated cell in your body that doesn't respond like your normal cells. And sometimes part of that irregularity is that it grows rapidly, especially because it typically feeds off of sugar. So now you have this rapid replicating, growing cell that's abnormal and mutated, and it becomes now this tumor or mass that is cancer. So we have to shut that down, right? First of all, we got to shut it down, and but you can, right? What feeds it? Sugar. Sugar's like, and that's like, we got that off of an article from MD Anderson, as well as multiple studies that have shown that cancer is fed from, you know, by sugar. But what else do you want to say about cancer? I'm trying to think.
Well, I mean, it's on the idea of sugar, the reason cancer feeds, I mean, your normal cells can also be fed by sugar, but cancer, from what I understand, has basically a malfunctioning mitochondria. They don't really have mitochondria like our normal cells do to help convert things into energy. So cancer actually requires twice as much glucose as your normal healthy cells. So in a way, sugar ends up being fuel to a fire when it comes to cancer in your body, versus your normal cells to be able to regulate that a little bit with, you know, of course, insulin and different things, and but yeah, sugar fuels it.
So that's one of the things that we want to, you know, to talk about with what cancer is, how cancer is kind of formed, what it feeds off of. Then we started looking at, okay, well, what causes cancer? Because that's a question that a lot of the traditional medical physicians aren't able to answer. When we say, well, what caused this? All they can say is a mutation. Well, yeah, it's mutated cells, but what caused that mutation? What is causing this? And a lot of times they can't say that. So we kind of were like, okay, well, when they do studies and they get these rats and they give them cancer, what are they doing to give these rats cancer? What is their etiology, right? Where does it come from? And they inject them with fungus. Hello, fungus, like what we're talking about. And what's in my blood floating around, and in a lot of people's blood floating around. And then we also were hearing another person talking about cancer and treating cancer, and they were saying how cancer a lot of times responds like fungus. It's not per se fungus because it's your own DNA intertwined with, it's mutated, but it could be mutated with fungus, right? Because anyway, hence it responds to antifungals and things. So hence at my doctor in Dallas, as soon as he heard I was had a cancer diagnosis, he prescribed me an antifungal. And part of my IV treatment plan is getting a bigger dose of IV antifungal, I think twice. Because there's been so many cases of cancer responding to antifungals. Could it be that the cancer is coming from fungus? Anyway, and the fact that that's how they give cancer to rats when they do these cancer studies with them.
Well, they found that the cancer cells and fungal cells, or fungus, have responded to similar environments. So like we were talking earlier, Lisa mentioned that cancer thrives in a low oxygen environment. Same with fungus. Cancer feeds off of sugar. Same with fungus. Cancer thrives in a more of an acidic environment. And doesn't fungus? Yeah, right. So does fungus. So basically, now what we're trying to do, or what this Dr. Dallas is having us do, is get Lisa to change the environment in her body where fungus and cancer cannot live.
Right. So we'll get more into that.
Okay.
We'll get more into that when we get more into the treatment with our follow-up with him. Okay. So now that we've kind of gone over cancer, now let's go to our first visit with the oncologist. So we go into the oncologist's office, and this is supposed to be day 1 of chemo. And we're kind of pumped, right? We've been praying. We have been seeing some results, all this kind of stuff. So we tell him, Doc, are you going to examine her? Me? That's, and he's like, yeah. And he said, well, do you think it's changed? And we're like, yeah, we think it's changed. And he goes, it's gotten bigger, right? And we looked at each other and at him, and we're like, no, we think it's gotten smaller. And he was like, I don't know about that, but I'll examine her in a minute. And then I said, Doc, it's dying. And he kind of was like, why do you think it's dying? And in my mind, I'm saying, because we've been praying that it's dying. But he said, I don't see why it would be dying. It's not dying. Anyway, so we finished going over all of our labs, which I'll go over in just a second, and stuff that he tested me. But then he goes to examine me, and he feels of it, and he goes and he looks at his paperwork, and he comes back and he feels of it again, and he said, you know what? Y'all are right. It's like half the size that it was. And you have to understand, when we got my biopsy and my sonogram done, the radiologist said, this thing is too big. There's no way they're going to be able to take it out. I'm just telling you, expect a mastectomy. And so I don't know exactly how big. I didn't ever get that report, the sonogram report where they measure it. But when we went to our first oncologist appointment, he measured it like around 4 to 5 centimeters. Then when we go to our first appointment, he's saying it's about 2 centimeters. So about half of what it was. And so he was like, I don't really know why this is half the size, because we haven't started treatment yet. Now we had already started our anti-candida diet. We did start that, and I had started my nystatin. I think we had already started that. I don't know.
Maybe a few days.
But only like a day or two of that.
But you've been doing prayer.
We have been praying, lots of praying.
H2O2.
And then we had started drinking food grade, a certain percentage of hydrogen peroxide, as well as soaking my feet in it and diffusing it beside my bed to get more oxygen in the air. So I had been doing that. So those things I had been doing.
And your diet had changed quite a bit.
Yeah, diet. So anyway, but he was like, there's no way this can be half the size because we haven't done treatment, but it's half the size. So then he did concede. He said maybe it is dying, but I really don't know how. So then we go over all of the scan. So because it was in my lymph node, they did a CT scan as well as a bone scan to make sure it hasn't moved anywhere else. And the bone scan came back negative, which was really good because that's where it went on my aunt. My aunt ended up having stage 4 bone cancer from her breast cancer. And it was like all over. When they did her scan, it was all in her ribs, it was in her hips, it was in her femurs, it was all over. So I was real nervous about that particular scan, but it came back negative. The CAT scan did show my lymph node, but he didn't mention the mass, but maybe it showed the mass in my breast too. But he did say, you know, it does confirm that it's just that one lymph node. Now, and he did say, you know, it has to be a mass for it to show up on these scans. It can't, like, you can have cancer cells floating around and it not pick those up. And so that was the purpose kind of chemo, was to kind of kill those little cancer cells floating around to keep it from spreading. Or some of the other treatments we're doing. But here's the thing too, I remember reading in an article from MD Anderson, we all have cancer cells, but we have these 2 wonderful genes in our body that are the ninjas for cancer, and they go around and they help us kill cancer and keep it at bay. So one of the other tests that the oncologist did was some genetic testing on those genes to see if there's something wrong with those 2 genes that make me predispositioned to cancer. And of course, if they came out positive, like we might want to get our children tested or make sure that they're screened earlier or whatever. Change their diet and lifestyle to help prevent cancer, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, so they did that test and he got that back and he said it's fine. And of course, with genes, you have 2 sides, one for your mom and one from your dad. And then there's 2 of them. So there's 2 genes. So there's really like 4 slots that could be off. You know, so like in one gene, if it was mutated or something was wrong with it, it could be one side. So now this gene to fight cancer is only working at like 50%, if that makes sense. You know, and there's 2 different ones, but he said it all came back normal. So that was really good. What was the other thing he tested that I thought I was going to mention? I can't remember. Oh, my tumor markers. You have these things called tumor markers, and what that is actually measuring is waste from cancer cells, like cancer poo-poo or whatever. Like, you know, your cells produce energy as well as waste product that it excretes, and then that's in your blood, which goes to your kidney or liver, and you usually filter it out, and it's waste that we put out either in breathing or urinating or through our GI system. So this particular lab, tumor markers, is measuring cancer waste. Mine came back normal, like a normal person without cancer. So then I was like, okay, doc, if I have this tumor and cancer in my lymph node, why is this normal and not high or elevated? Even elevated high normal, it wasn't. And he couldn't answer that. And all he could say was, well, we don't really look at that anyway. That's why we don't diagnose with this. And I'm like, then why do you even draw it if it's not something y'all look at? Which didn't make sense to me, but I think it was because he couldn't explain it. So anyway, we went ahead and went with round 1 of chemo, which turned out to not be fun, right? Was it fun? It wasn't fun. Like, I started getting real dizzy and nauseated at the end of chemo. Like, the chemo was still dripping, but I didn't have much left to go. That dizziness and nausea just increased as we went and ate and picked up kids. And then on the way home, like, we had to pull over and get the cold air on me. You know, I took the meds that they gave me, 4 different medications to help with nausea. Took 2 of those to try to make it home. 10 miles down the road, threw up all in the car. Champion right here, he cleaned me up, he cleaned the car up. I got home, went to bed. Again, I got up that evening to go to the bathroom just to pee, and I'm throwing up. The next day, I spent most of the time in bed. And then on the next day, I was throwing up again. Tried to take a shower. Really getting up and doing anything, I was throwing up. Even with me taking my meds around the clock. But I had other side effects. Shaking, a lot of shaking, uncontrollable shaking, constipation, you know, that kind of stuff. Because it shuts everything down. Because what chemo does is it basically causes intense oxidative stress to your body. But the thing with chemo is it can't differentiate your cancer cells from your regular cells. It just goes out there and...
Well, it goes after rapidly dividing cells. So
okay.
any part of your body that normally has rapid cell turnover, like your stomach lining, your hair follicles,
the mouth,
the lining of your mouth. A lot of people get ulcers. She didn't get any ulcers.
Anything very vascular. That's right. Rapidly turnover. So that's what it's going after, and that's why you go back for repeat. You know, because by the time new cells are forming and turning over, then you're hitting it again with this chemo. But the scary part was palpitations, right? So I had my heart feeling like it was going to beat out of my chest. And I was thinking, what is this doing to my heart? I also was thinking, what is this doing to my brain for being so dizzy? But the heart thing really got me thinking. Because, yeah, I could recover after this first go-round, but then you're going to hit it again, and then again, and then again. You know, time after time, having my heart do that, and what's it going to do to my heart? So I got 2 different chemo drugs, and one of the chemo drugs is very hard on the heart. I had to get an echocardiogram done to see what my heart function was before even getting chemo, to see, 1, if I could tolerate it, but 2, as a baseline, because they said it will affect your heart. Hopefully not much, but they can give meds if it does affect my heart to help with heart function later. But after I got done with chemo, they would do another echocardiogram to see how it affected my heart. And from my understanding, it wasn't like if it would affect your heart, it was more of how much it will affect your heart. Because it's such a common side effect of that one particular chemo. So here I am in bed thinking I'm, going to trade cancer for heart failure and be on heart failure medications and not be able to do, hiking or swimming or running, with my kids. And to me, I was just like, this is not okay. Another thing, while I was so sick in bed, of course, I couldn't look at all my scriptures I had written out on cards or in my journals, but one kept playing over in my head, and that was John 10:10. It says, the thief come to steal, kill, and destroy, which I can say is cancer. But I, Jesus, have come to give you life and life abundantly, or life and life to the fullest. And I was thinking, this is not life to the fullest. I am barely living here. I can't do anything without throwing up. I'm dizzy nonstop, even when I'm laying still. And my heart's beating out of my chest periodically. It wasn't continuous, thankfully, but it would last a good 30 minutes, an hour, and then I would have a break, and then it would come on again, without any cause of it to come on. And then one thing I remember thinking too in bed about this scripture that played over and over in my mind was, it's not conditional. He doesn't say he'll give you life and life abundantly when you're in good health or on Sundays. It's how we're supposed to live in all situations, right? So like hard times or with any kind of diagnosis, our road to healing should be one of life and life abundant, even in your process of getting healed. And I thought, I don't know. I don't think this chemo thing is going to work for me. It does not align with what I'm reading or what I'm meditating on scripture. So anyway, I don't know if there's anything else to say really about the chemo. I did recover day 4 or 5. I was able to start kind of eating. That was another thing. I couldn't hardly eat anything. I didn't drink hardly anything because it was so nauseous. And so I started getting up, but still real dizzy, probably real dizzy until about a week out. And golly, my bowels still aren't normal, and it's been 2 weeks.
We did have a few questions beyond just the side effects about chemo that caused us even more to question if this was the right path for us. And one is the fact that you'd already seen the cancer. Your tumor markers were that of a normal person, which lets you almost indicates that the cancer was no longer growing.
Right.
It was actually dying, and he even confessed that, hey, your tumor shrunk, it's possibly dying, yet the chemo, the way it works, is it goes after stuff that's growing. So is the chemo even being effective, or is it just making Lisa sick and really
weakening?
Actually, maybe even taking us back a step rather than making progress. We're hurting her health rather than helping boost her immune system and make her stronger to fight the cancer.
Right, because it can lower your white blood cell count and your platelet count. You know, when your white blood cell count is down, it's really easy to catch viruses or colds, or which is a virus, you know, or anything really. So yeah, are we putting me more in harm's way than doing good here? So we go back. Well, it was like a week or so after chemo, we went to our follow-up appointment with our doctor in Dallas. And when we were talking to him, he also did tumor markers. And he told us, well, your tumor markers are negative. And I said, okay, tell me why they're negative if I have this cancer. Same question, different doc. And he said, well, since they measure waste, it tells me that your cancer cells aren't producing much waste, if any, which means they're not probably living, or they're definitely not growing. They're not actively growing, because if you're actively growing and doing, you're going to have a lot more waste. So he actually gave us an answer where the other doctor was like, well, I don't know, but it's not something we look at really. Anyway, so that I liked. I like having an answer, and that makes sense. If it's measuring waste and it's that of a normal person, then it's probably definitely not growing, and could be, dying or dead, all dead. Anyway, another thing, following up with the doctor in Dallas, is so he checked my thyroid, and it was off, and so he put me on thyroid, and he thought, you might actually do better, and this actually may help all these other hormones in your body, because it's like the mother hormone of our body. It has a part to play in a lot of other hormone production. Then he also checked me for another genetic marker, not the ones for cancer, not the genes that fight cancer, but this other gene that helps your body with detoxification. And I do have a genetic mutation on that, and it's called the MTHFR. And there's different variations of that mutation, because again, you have two sides of the gene, one from your mom, one from your dad. And so sometimes it could just be one of those that's, mutated, or it could be both that's mutated, or there may even be different ways it mutates. I'm not really sure, but he said there's different variations. And he said, and me, have the worst one, meaning that you detox way less than other people who might have this genetic mutation. And he said it's on both sides of your gene. So he says your mom has the genetic mutation and your dad has the genetic mutation. And therefore your offspring, my offspring, has the genetic mutation, at least one side from me, because no matter if they got this side of my gene or this side of my gene, they got it. So he's like, first thing, y'all are now a gluten-free family, because gluten causes inflammation, And inflammation is another thing that doesn't cause you to detox as well. So he's like, we got to get the gluten out to help you detox. And then he said, I'm going to give you these specific enzymes that help with this particular variation that's going to help you detox the things that you're not detoxing. And he said, like on my very best day, like if I was in perfect health, perfect diet, no inflammation, no challenges to my system, my detoxification's like at 35%. That's on my best day. But how often?
Yeah, 30% of somebody who doesn't have the gene mutation.
Right. So compared to somebody without that genetic mutation. And he's like, and that's on your best day. So on challenging, when you have stress and you have, you just had this CT scan and they put this dye in you, he's all like, you're probably detoxing much less. So these toxins are building up. Your body's not able to get rid of them. And what happens when we have this extra I'm trying to think, foreign stuff in your body, you have that chance of it getting in there and mutating your normal cells and causing cancer, right? So he's like, we're going to help you with that. So got on some supplements, got on a special like gluten-free diet to help with that. And then we're going to get that metals test, because he says that's why you have metals in your system, probably, is because your body can't detox them out like the normal person. So we're going to do some IV chelation at some point after we do that test to see what all is in my body. What else did we do on that? He gave us a plan. The plan is so big. His plan for me. There's a lot of IV treatments he listed that's going to help me fight cancer, but also boost my immunity to help my body. Some of those things are like IV. So the first one I got when we went last week was IV hydrogen peroxide, and then I had IV diflucan, the antifungal. This week I'm going to get IV glutathione, thione, right? Which is like a really, it's like the best antioxidant out there. So that's going to actually help my body build my immunity and really to help recover from like chemo and that kind of stuff. But then the very next day I'm going to actually do some oxidative stress. So similar to chemo, we're going to cause some oxidative stress to help kill anything foreign in my body like cancer or viruses. But we're going to do it with ozone. So we're going to have an IV of ozone. And by flooding my system with oxygen, those things like fungus, cancer, viruses that don't do well in a high oxygen environment, it's going to help kill it. But my healthy cells, my normal cells, it's going to actually boost them because they're getting this boost of oxygen. So it works similar to chemo, but it's also different in the fact that it's actually helping my good cells while it's hurting the bad cells. Anything you were going to say?
Well, one might ask, well, how do your healthy cells not get the oxidative stress from the flood of oxygen? Obviously, we need oxygen for our healthy cells to thrive, but from what I understand, that's partially why we take antioxidants, is it actually helps with the production of certain enzymes that protect our cells, our healthy cells, from oxidative stress. So that extra oxygen won't affect the normal cells like it will the mutated, dysfunctional cancer cells.
Right. Then there's some other things. I think I'll be getting some IV vitamin C, and some of this stuff I'll repeat, but he has this whole plan and a certain order that I'll be getting these things to help with all of this. Then there's things like he wants me to get a lymphatic massage, I forget how often, to help move lymph through my system to not be stagnant, right? And then what else did he recommend? Sauna treatments. He said everyone needs to sweat for at least 10 minutes a couple of times a week. That's one of your ways your body detoxifies. And a lot of times people don't sweat enough. They don't, we kind of live in this lifestyle of, unless you're purposely working out, you're not sweating. So they have recommend sauna treatments, chiropractic care, that's on my list. Coffee enemas, that's on my list. I should be doing. Yeah, he's real big on that. And he's like, I don't make any money telling you to go put coffee up your butt. Like, just do it because it's good for you. And of course, there's like a recipe that we follow. But the whole purpose of it is to detox your liver and your GI system, right? Pull all those toxins out, which makes you healthier. And anyway, so haven't done that yet, but we have the bag. We just haven't done it yet. Of course, all the diet changes he has me on. What are some other of the other treatments? Some additional supplements like enzymes and things.
Yeah, there's certain supplements you take because of that gene mutation, aren't there?
Yes. So there's, he recommended 3, but I couldn't find one in the store. We might have to buy it from him, but the other 2 I found in like Natural Grocer, but it's a certain enzyme, I believe, to help my body detox in the way that genetic mutation, that MTHFR, since that's not doing it, these supplements will help me do that. I know there's some more treatment stuff that he has on my list that we haven't done yet, both in IVs as well as other things. He recommends journaling and meditating on scripture every day, like 10 to 30 minutes. He recommends doing Tai Chi or yoga. Yoga mainly for the stretching aspect. Tai Chi, he really recommends because it really helps you, like someone like me, which is, we started doing it, me and the kids, and it's hard. It's hard for me to slow down my movements. I want to do it, next, but everything is very slow and deep breathing. We went to a breathing class and a nutrition class that they had. So slowing down and deep breathing. And then another thing with Tai Chi is it's very balanced. So if you go out, you come in. If you go this way, you come back this way. And there's a lot of cross body stuff and almost like pumping action that helps your lymph move. Anyway, so we've started learning how to do Tai Chi and continuing the prayer and standing on truth. Anyway, so that was our follow-up with him. So now we come back after our follow-up with him and our two initial IV treatments to do our second appointment with our oncologist and round 2 of chemo. So as we're meeting with him, we're telling him how chemo went round 1 and all the side effects I had and my major concerns with my heart. Okay? That's my major concern. I told him I don't want to trade cancer for heart failure or compromised, problems with my heart, because I want to live, and I want to live life to the fullest with my daughters and my son. And of course he's like, well, we can change things up. Like we can delay chemo longer. And I'm like, I'm fine right now. I don't think we need to go 3 weeks. 2 weeks is fine. But that's not addressing the heart. And then he said, oh, we can give you some other nausea medicine. And I said, that's not addressing my concern of my heart. Anyway, because they can't go around that. I mean, he said we can cut back on your chemo, but we still have to give you that chemo. And the one that's could potentially affect my heart. Yeah, I could go a lighter dose possibly and not have that reaction. But he cannot guarantee that I won't have heart problems or it won't affect my heart or make my heart any weaker. And even though he gave me a lot of options, those options, cutting back chemo, like on the dosage, waiting longer between chemos, giving me different nausea medicine, and I thought there was one other option.
What are you talking about not doing that one injectable thing that?
Oh yeah, he thought the dizziness came from this injectable thing that's supposed to help stimulate my white blood cell growth 48 hours after chemo, 46 or 48 hours after chemo. And I told him, no, I was dizzy like before the chemo was done infusing and was throwing up on the way home. Like that didn't even go off till 46, or what is it? Maybe not 46, maybe it was 26 or 28 hours. Yeah, it was the next evening. I was like, I was having issues way before then. I don't think it was that medicine. And plus, that's not addressing my real concern of my heart. So, anyway, he presented all his options, and I just kept thinking back to the scripture that God gave me while I was in bed. And I was like, this isn't really, your options aren't really addressing my concerns here. And you can't guarantee that I'm not going to have any kind of heart damage or problems later. If under my understanding, it was more of what degree more than if you would have it affect your heart. And I just said, no, I'm not hearing what I need to hear to be able to confidently do this when I believe there are other options out there to help kill this cancer if it's still living, which we really don't feel like it's growing. I mean, it's not growing, it's shrinking. And that was another thing. On our follow-up with him that day for round 2 of chemo, he examined me again. And he looked back at his notes and he said, this thing is, again, half its size. It's down to 1 centimeter. So it's gone from 4 or a little bigger, 4 centimeters to 2 centimeters to 1 centimeter. And, so here it is, this little bitty thing now. And yes, there's still like this mass in my body. Is it growing? No. We again asked him about the tumor markers and how we think it's dead and it's dissolving, but he, didn't agree with that. And anyway, just weighing everything on the table and trying to not make decisions out of fear, but out of faith, and knowing the scripture that God gave me in my head that played over and over again while I was, recovering from round 1 and dealing with this stuff. I just told him, no, I don't think that this is my path. So he said, okay. Well, then the next thing would be surgery to remove what's there out, because we can't leave that in there. And I said, okay, we're okay with surgery. Our doctor in Dallas is okay with surgery. This is something everyone's on the same page. So I feel comfortable with moving forward with surgery. So that was a Monday's appointment. So we went to see the surgeon on Wednesday. And so we went into her appointment, and she said, I was hopeful and thinking, now that the mass is only 1 centimeter, maybe we can just do a lumpectomy and a lymphectomy where they take the lymph node. But she said, no, we're going to do a mastectomy, which, from what I've heard from this particular surgeon, she tends to err more on the side of not doing mastectomies. Like, you can request a mastectomy and she would be like, no, I don't want to do it. We don't need to do it. She's pretty, she really is more for lumpectomies. So for her to say that, I was kind of surprised. So then we were asking her, well, why do you think, a mastectomy versus a lumpectomy? And she showed me my mammogram, and she said, you have all this fibrotic calcifications all in your breast, and it goes all the way up to your clavicle, and it's real dense around your nipple. And I want to get all of that out because there might be cancer in it. Now, not cancer you can see, there's no mass, but the thing is when they took the biopsies of my mass, it said that it was non-invasive, which means it was contained like in a sac, a protective covering. But then the cancer in my lymph node is invasive cancer, meaning that there's cancer floating around or ruptured out of this sac. So she was saying that the cancer in my lymph node isn't the cancer from my mass. And so it's from somewhere. So she's worried that there's some cancer out there in my breast tissue that has now filtered into my lymph node, but it's not necessarily in a mass, or if it's in a mass, it's part of the other mass in a different spot that we didn't biopsy or something. But since she doesn't know where that is, and I have all this calcification and fibrotic tissue, which is always pretty questionable or can lead to cancer, or is more common for cancer to, I don't know. She wants to just take it. So she said that what she'll do is she will do this thing where they inject dye like around my nipple, and it filters through my breast and drains into my lymph nodes. And so when she goes in there, she'll see what lymph nodes are the main ones that drain my breast tissue, and she will take those out and send them off down to the lab to get biopsied to see if there's cancer in it. And she said if there's any one of those that isn't the one with my metal marker, so not the one that we've already biopsied, but out of the other ones, if there's any cancer in those, then she will go back and take all of my lymph nodes. But if those come back negative for cancer, then she is fine with just taking those out and leaving the others. And so that's the plan as of right now, that it's tentatively scheduled, or she has me scheduled for March 17th for that surgery. And we're still in prayer about it. I mean, our doctor in Dallas says get what's in there out. Oncologist is saying let's get what's in there out. So they're all on the same page, which is amazing. But it's still kind of scary to think that's kind of major surgery, and that's, anyway, so we're still coming to terms with that and thinking about that, thinking through that. And then they hit us with, we're going to do radiation afterwards, which we had specifically asked about radiation at the beginning, and they said no, but maybe since we're not doing chemo, now they're wanting us to do radiation. I'm not really sure. I've seen, when it comes to like the more holistic or natural approach, I've heard some people be okay with radiation. So I don't know. So that's something that we don't know much more, except that they're going to want to do radiation. So we are also kind of researching that now, because that's just who we are. We like to look into things, and he likes to pull up research and stuff. So y'all can be praying on our navigating through that. And I guess that's it. Any other thing you can think about, catching people up to date on where we're at?
Well, I mean, talking about the surgeon, I think we both felt like it was kind of a bait and switch when we first met with her. She never indicated the possibility, or really that she was even leaning towards a mastectomy, that it was more, if we can do the chemo and shrink this, that we'll just be able to maybe do a lumpectomy. I remember her specifically saying that, and that's why we were kind of like, okay, well, we might want to just do the chemo just so we can shrink it and get it out of there without having to do a major surgery. I mean, it would still be a surgery, but...
well, and she did say the other day at the appointment that even if I went through all of my chemo, she probably would recommend a mastectomy because of this tissue that's in my breast.
That's what I was trying to explain.
Oh, sorry.
But yeah, it's... So the other day she's saying that even with the chemo now, they would have to take it all. And that was not what she told us originally. So it's a little deceptive. And so we're kind of, I think, I'm even thinking second opinions. We need to, really find out what's the best route. We are on board for doing surgery if necessary. I mean, that's obviously to get it out of there, but to what extent? And we just want to do what's best.
Well, when you want to trust your physician, and when feel like you've kind of been deceived or led in the wrong, given false hope or whatever I'm trying to say, then it kind of makes you start questioning other things. Like, is there things she's not telling us, or like her plan to check out these other lymph nodes, but she's planning on taking them anyway. She just doesn't want to tell us. Like, it kind of makes you start wondering these things.
Oh, and if they take all the lymph nodes, that puts Lisa at risk of...
Well, it puts me at a higher risk for lymphedema.
Lymphedema.
You take any of your lymph nodes and you're at risk for developing lymphedema, where the lymph builds up in that extremity, right? Because your lymph nodes are little nodes that kind of help process and move and filter the lymph through your lymphatic system. And really it's just the movement of your muscles and things that move it. So there's things that you can do to help prevent lymph from building up. Like she said, she would be showing me exercises that I'll have to do to kind of pump that lymph to where it won't build up in my arm. And I'll have to measure my wrists every day to make sure it's not swelling up and that kind of thing. But of course, the more lymph nodes you move, the higher risk of developing that is, so... And you want your lymph to move. It's supposed to move. That's what keeps you healthy, is that moving and filtering. So, Anyway, so we still have, I always feel like with this journey, I guess you call it a journey, I don't know, but it's like you get, things are on the table and you kind of sift through it and decide what you're going to do, but then there's 8 more things put on your table for me now to sift through and figure out, what I want to do. And it can be hard because not everyone's on the same page, and people are giving me input, but it's from their perspective or their view, and I'm trying to look at things wholly, right? Because there's always 2 sides to a coin, and people only know their own perspective or their own side, and anyway, and there's days where I get really kind of bummed and discouraged and just wishing it would all go away. And then there's other days where I'm much more of the fighter and standing on truth and encouraged and that's those days that my faith is stronger, that I'm actually able to tackle stuff and think about things. The other days, if I do, it really just gets me kind of depressed and down and overwhelmed, So there's still a lot of prayer needed, not just for me, but for my family and kids. He wants to help, but he also wants it to be my choice. And, so knowing that line, my kids, golly, they're troopers. All this traveling back and forth to Dallas, getting IV treatments there. And then the appointments. I mean, we had an appointment Monday, we had an appointment Wednesday, and then now it's Thursday and Friday, and we're driving for more appointments. And just hopefully them understanding this is just for a time, hopefully, and but yes, prayers are being felt and appreciated. So thank y'all, and we will keep y'all posted hopefully as things unfold more. And sorry there's been a long lapse between I feel like from the beginning of chemo to now I've been kind of out of touch because I've either been sick or at appointments. So hopefully this video catches y'all up. I know it's a long video, but I hope it's good, full of some good information for y'all. All right, bye.
God bless.